Welcome to the Temple Talks podcast, where we support you to improve your business management systems, share knowledge, and hear from special guests across various industry sectors. And now, over to your host, Bob Hughes.
This is Bob Hughes from Temple QMS. I'm delighted this morning to be joined by Mark Clewley from DNV. We've known one another since around 2009.
That's right, yeah. It's been, thanks for having me, Bob. Morning. It's been a long time, hasn't it? 2009, which, that was when I first got into the certification industry that we started working together. So, I've been piggybacking on your experience for a long time. So,
But why do you think organisations need management standards?
It's something that, when I speak to a lot of companies over the years, it's always been, I guess, there's always, of course, we'll get on to in terms of the benefits and things, but it's commercially driven a lot of times, I guess, in terms of tenders and being asked for it from certain industries, etc. And I guess the reason that it get asked for, from my experience in tenders a lot, is because of that reassurance down the supply chain of knowing that these systems are in place, especially with the sorts of things that management systems are there to do. I don't know if that's sort of a similar thing that you tend to see.
It is. And one of the things that we often get asked is, okay, tenders is good, we need it, but what else would it give me? What do you think? How could we help explain that and win over clients? But apart from tenders, it's going to give me this. What's your thoughts?
That's part of both of our jobs, I guess, with yourselves, is that helping with from an implementation perspective, and us as a certification body, is that it becomes more than a certificate on the wall, it becomes more than a piece of paper. And it's, and I think that's, again, go back in terms of why clients ask for it, is they ask for it, not just to tick a box. I think they ask for it to make sure that these sorts of things, especially with where standards are now, in terms of the structure of the business management systems now, risk, opportunity, the leadership, right from the top down, etc. and stuff like that. Because it's interesting, over the years, I don't know how you feel that management systems sort of standards have evolved over your time and your experience within it?
Yeah, well, they have evolved from the old British Standard 5750 days when it was all about conformity.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting now, but it's more about efficiency and effectiveness. And, are we working to actual cycle times, and is the customer getting benefits from the systems? What's your thoughts on benefits for the customer, Mark? What do you see the critical benefits would be?
In terms of having a system in place?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's you mentioned a couple there, really. I think it's, and again, it goes back to, where the standards are now, I guess. I mean, one of the things that I sort of talk about, just about how the standards have evolved, is the terminologies that we use.
Yeah.
Because, we auditor, you talk about, standards, which I wasn't involved in at the time, pre my time, but from what I hear, was a lot of, you must do this more, more directing the customer than them having their own interpretation with it within their management system and how they work to it. And I think that brings a lot more benefit to a client in terms of them shaping their own management system, in terms of how they work and them embedding that within their business. And I talk about that from leadership, it's not, it's linking that to their business goals and their, in terms of opportunities, as I say, mitigating risk and improving the all-round customer experience of dealing with their business. And that's going to lead to a better service, better products, etc. and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's something behavioral.
Absolutely. And that will help effectiveness as well.
As a certification body, obviously, we speak to a lot of companies that are probably at the point of they've decided to go for it, or even at some stages have already gone through that implementation side. But from your point of view, you obviously probably catch them a lot earlier than we do from helping in the system of implementation. When you go into a business for management systems, where would you typically start in terms of starting that implementation process?
Well, normally, Mark, you're in a boardroom type environment and you're meeting the people, they're getting to know you, you're getting to know them. And it's a good point what you've asked there, because people say, where do you start? And sometimes I like to say, well, should we start at the back end? What's actually coming out of your processes in terms of the management system standards and the structures? so that we can have a look at what's coming out and try and improve. For example, if it was quality, it could be quality cost delivery service, what's coming out of internal quality, external quality warranty, things like that. What's coming out of cost, in terms of having to rework it and things like that. If it's a service, what's coming out in terms of customer satisfaction and results and achievements. If it was like a chase health and safety scenario, then there's always something going on in claims, and this easy approach to no win, no fee, and potentially if we had any visits from external agencies and things like that we're trying to address.
So is it understanding what's happening at the back end?
Yes.
To then start to find root causes and how the management system works.
Absolutely. And then we can build that into the context of the organisation. And from the context, we can say these are the internal factors that affect the business. These are the external factors that can affect the business. And then we connect that then into the interaction of risk management and opportunity management. And we start off then by evolving a conversation of improvement that normally becomes quite attractive.
Just with that as well, what do you find are the biggest challenges that people face when starting that implementation side of things?
That's a good question, and I'd say processes, because people say, what processes do I need? And how do I go about creating them? And do I need procedures? Do I need processes? And you have this conversation of creating an effective process flow that links to the standard that we're working to. And where there's a risk in this process flow, that we have some kind of prevention to mitigate that risk.
Is there any, how important is that as well in terms of getting buy-in from the business and people involved in them processes?
Well, that's a good point, because we always try and create that process ownership, which links to roles and responsibilities. So as these processes start to evolve, you have a process owner that links to the organisation's roles and responsibilities. And then from roles and responsibilities, you say, have we got the right competence to deliver these processes, so that people don't become stretched and outside their comfort of delivery of whatever it is that they've got to do.
And what sort of the expectations with standards obviously evolving and leadership? What sort of the expectations of standards now in leadership teams?
Well, people want results, without a shadow of a doubt now. We don't want a situation where we have this standard that doesn't deliver results. So definitely it's all about what is it going to do for this organisation in terms of critical factors of results, so that we can analyse and use data to make improvement. It really is about key performance measures that link to objectives that will deliver this organisation's strategy.
Is that where it goes back to standards becoming more of a business management system as well? I mean, that leadership aren't going to get quizzed on clauses of standards, are they? It's going to link it into...
Yeah, absolutely. If you call it a business management system rather than a quality or health and safety, people kind of connect to it. It becomes a more attractive, viable discussion to have a business management system. And you're right, one standard does link to another.
Yeah.
So very often, for example, if you get the quality right, then that supports health and safety as well.
And that's where they start to see the benefit
Yeah.
from a commercial value, but then also internally as well, what we were touching on with you as well.
Absolutely. People want to see reduced costs. And it's interesting, for example, quality management systems don't actually mention cost. They mention efficiency, they mention effectiveness, but the ISO 9001 isn't actually cost driven. And if you take best practice from another standard, i.e. IATF, the international standard, then obviously cost is more prominent in that standard, so that you can kind of use other standards, the more basic ISO standard, and people start to warm to that and use that as really good business benefits.
Yeah, I talked a lot when I talk to clients a lot about saying, like, especially at their early stages, and they talk about, like, have you got templates? Have you got this? Have you got that? And you always sort of say that you sort of understand that when we're auditing a business, we're looking at their interpretation of the standard for how it works for their business, and how important is it for a company and yourself when working with a business to make that management system fit to their business, something they work to day in, day out, rather than pick it up.
Absolutely. You don't want to over complex things. For example, if you take doc control, records control, if you make it too complex, too cumbersome, people won't use it. It was almost setting up for, to fail. So, for example, if it's a construction site and there's complexity with multi-temporary sites that spring up, for 3 or 4 or 5 months to build something, and then they get shut down. But we've got to manage that interaction of paperwork. So that would become more complex than, say, a single site where, it's nice and easy to manage documents and records, documents of external origin, and managing those is, of course, big risk. But yeah, in all fairness, it's important that we keep the processes manageable and not overly complex. Take, for example, internal auditing. If it's a multi-site, then the internal audit processes become more complex than a single site. If you take control of non-conformance and corrective action, that's got to work really effectively, because you don't want repeat concerns and repeat customers having upsets with the same situation.
Is that like, so saying, like, as a consultant as well, when we're helping with that implementation side of things, what was like, and I see different things as you can imagine, like, what's your end goal when you work with a client in terms of how, obviously, the support that you give them on that implementation? What's your end goal in terms of course, they want the certification, but from an implementation perspective?
For us, the end goal is to make the business management systems work effectively, but really without them knowing it. So we set the processes up, we set the structure up, we set the systems up that match what they need to do to deliver their expectations, number one, so that they're working to their processes, but also they're working to the requirements of the international standard, but they're doing it all without actually really knowing it, and it's kind of structured and built in. It's like, for example, if you take on a new inquiry, this is what happens. So we work to the process. So it doesn't matter if the morning person takes the inquiry, or the afternoon person, or the 6 till 10 twilight person, as inquiries are coming in. This is how the inquiry works. This is what happens. So there's a structured approach with little variation, so that it happens right first time every time.
Is that like one of the misconceptions of certification of management systems as well, is that it makes things more complicated, it adds in paperwork? Do you think that's, like, when I say misconception of it, but that's people's interpretation of it when they first get into it? We'll get management systems, whatever, to completely rip up how we work.
Really good point, because in actual fact, we always say, all we're going to do is structure what you already do. So we're going to put proper forms in, proper systems in. We're not going to actually add any red tape, because people do think that. There is a misconception, but people think, you're going to come in here and add loads of non-value added. In actual fact, we're only going to structure what you do already, but match it up to the requirements of the standard, formulate the processes, and so that it adds value, it doesn't add cost, but it makes streamlining, it reduces variation, it creates a right first time approach, so that the business management systems actually add value to the business rather than add cost to the business.
Yeah, is that like when the standard transitioned, or like the Aegis 9001 as well, went risk-based as well with the others? in 2015. I was having a conversation with someone where they said one of the biggest risks to their business was people, the knowledge of people, etc. Because of like their management system. If someone got, and they put it in this sort of term, if someone got hit by their MD, got hit by a bus, they may as well fold up and go away. And is that almost like with the quality system or environment, health and safety, whatever it might be? Is that it's almost like a roadmap of what they do?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. We right at the start of the management system standards, and they're all the same, whether it's quality, health and safety, environment, information security. Right at the start in section 4, it's about creating those processes that manage the organisation's standards, systems and requirements, so they become less dependent on people having that knowledge. That knowledge was still needed, but it's more a structured approach that's documented to deliver the products or the services that the organisation wants to do. And that's what they're good at doing. And so we've got to help them implement their processes in a structured way that align to the systems to deliver, the right first-time approach of excellence.
One of the things you talk about as well when people are audited is that it's like, and that's why I say I don't like the terms audit, auditor, misconception of what they're doing. And essentially, we're just talking to people about how they do their job and seeing that management system working. I guess when we're auditing them, like when you're doing internal audits or audits through it, you're talking to people involved in the process and what they do.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And strangely enough, that happens a lot, whereby you're kind of checking, are they working to their expectations rather than standards, clauses out the systems. Because if you start to mention clauses and standards, although they're there in your mind, you've got to make sure that they're working to how they should work to achieve their strategy, their direction, and their right first time. So that's how that works.
Just like as well, going back to the, you mentioned like efficiency and stuff like that around standards. And just like, and again, talking about misconceptions of it, is if it did make things more complicated or add in paperwork, so like my sort of take on that is it almost contradict what standards are there to do. And it always like makes it where actually does it comply with the standard, or is it an effective management system if it's making things more complicated? Then, do you know what I mean? That's something embedding within their business. It shows that the management system, I guess, doesn't work for them.
Really interesting, because that's one of the challenges. There's these sections and clauses and sub-clauses that we can talk about within management system standards, but you've kind of got to embed them in to their processes so that they connect up and match, but without it getting too cumbersome. If it becomes too cumbersome, you won't get the buy-in, it won't become an attractive option, and people will switch off.
Yeah.
So there's always a challenge by meeting the requirements of the standards, connecting them to the organisation's processes, but without getting too cumbersome.
Yeah. Exactly. You must see it managed in all different shapes and sizes as well with organisation.
Well, and these days it's all gone paperless, as you know. So the old requirements and terminology of quality manuals have gone, and in fact you don't even need one.
Yeah.
And now it's all working. Are we working to process? But that process actually we've written.
Yeah.
So that process has got an owner as well, so that if we're not working to process, who's the go-to person that we can say, why have you switched off from doing what we all agreed we said we would do?
Yeah.
So, Mark, what options do organisations have to implement these management system standards once they've made their mind up?
Well, we can't, obviously we've been an accredited body, we can't do what you guys would do in terms of taking the lead of consultancy and being more hands-on. But so we talk about a few things different. I think it leads into a few things that I'd always discuss with a client of timescales, experience, resource is a big one as well. Do they have the resource in the company to manage that internally? And and the experience that they've got and what they've got in place already. Because that then filters through to different options, really. One, in terms of obviously if they don't have the resource, the time, the experience, is where obviously companies like yourself and what you do is much more, it's really valuable as well in terms of taking that pressure off. And obviously what we do together in terms of training, if they did want that resource internally, there's implementation, internal auditing, and bringing that knowledge of the standards to them people that are going to manage it internally, along with their management, their knowledge, of how they work, how the company works, and bringing that experience and knowledge internally. And we can do things like a gap analysis, which is highlights key areas, but doesn't go into the detail that you guys do. So there's different options really, but it really depends on their resource, experience, and timescales, and what's best for the company really to get the most from the implementation. Has such a knock-on effect to the rest of the process. So
consultancy does bring knowledge, experience, past lessons learned, challenges, and up-to-date information.
Absolutely, yeah. It helps with a few things really. Yeah, like I say, is bringing that experience and knowledge straight away, which brings on leaps and bounds in terms of time that it would take, and obviously what sort of things you've explained already in terms of how you'd mould that management system for. And also just that impartiality element of it as well. And also, obviously, you guys help with from a implementation perspective, but then also, in terms of, say, internal auditing ongoing, that's where training can help as well in bringing that knowledge and experience internally, because you don't audit your own processes and have that impartiality that the standard says. So that's where things like training or using outside help like consultants can be really effective.
Yeah, and having that knowledge of high risk clauses within the standards that you kind of know could be problematic, so you can focus more attention on those, so that when the certification body does come on site, there's less likelihood of a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a thing of, I think again, it goes back to what we talk about a lot, isn't it, of getting making the management system work for your business. So if you've got knowledge of whether knowledge on the business processes and how they work, which obviously you've explained in terms of how you gain that knowledge, along with knowing the standard and the expertise, and you put them together, it's where you can really start to see the value of not only the implementation, as saying, which sets the tone a lot for how smooth and what you get out of the certification process when we come in to do that, but then also from an ongoing maintenance and the continued improvement there.
And what do you see, Mark, over the period of 3 years, the cycle of the certificate? What do you see are the challenges that organisations have managing that cycle of certificate and entering into like the recertification process?
I think one of the things that we always try and do is, I think it's easy to achieve the standard and think that's it. You gain the certification and think that you've done it, we've achieved it, which I think sometimes actually I speak to a lot of clients about, probably don't sing and dance a lot more about the effort and time that goes into actually and the achievement of gaining the certification in the first place. But I think it's sometimes just having that, recognising what you've done, but then also seeing it as an evolving continual process and something that, and again, I think that's our role as a certification body in terms of making sure that we're keeping it fresh, that we're not getting into a repetitive, stagnant role, if you like, and we're keeping that fresh to see that improvement in all areas. So I think that's one of the things that we do with our approach to certification, in the sense of course, there's mandatory elements of certification that we have to audit, every audit, your top level processes, but we also want to make sure that we're focusing our time in the right areas for the business, where them risks are, where the key, not spending as much time in the lower risk, not as much of a focus for that business. We want to make sure we're really digging into the areas that are going to mitigate risk, drive that continued improvement. So that's where we continually have these input from the client in terms of focus areas and where they want that to be, so that we make sure that that's, with the continuity of auditor, knowing the business, along with that freshening up and making sure there's that clear direction as the business grows and as the business sort of changes direction, how we approach the audit does that as well.
And of course, risks are emerging all the time, and challenges in terms of managing the supply chain, managing outsourced processes, kind of thing, managing the effectiveness of the internal audits. How do you see, from a certification body point of view, how do you see the internal audits generally? Do you see them as effective, adding value? Are they delivering what the standards need them to do you feel?
I think that would vary from company to company, but like it's probably something I don't see a lot of, not being hands-on, being the auditors than myself. But like it's, I think that again it goes into that. I think training and awareness and things internally as well, keeping up to date with things. But then we always, that's one of the things that we try and make sure that the auditors is I mean, I talk about adding value is we're not, that's why I talk about not liking terminologies like audit, auditor. There is that, of course, and we don't hide behind the consultancy. Of course, we don't cross that line of consultancy, but it doesn't mean that we can't be open and talk about, specific areas and things like that. So in terms of challenges with it, it's probably something I don't see a lot of. It's probably something you see more than I do, really, in terms of challenges around that.
Sometimes internal audits are done because they've got to be done.
Yeah.
But by people who don't really want to do it, have not got no really big interest in them. That's why there's some benefits of, using external type thing. What do you see the benefits for continuing certification? I mean, there's always reputation, isn't there? And there's always that external conformity review. What do you see, in addition, the additional benefits of continuing certification?
It's goes back to a lot of what we've said, really, in terms of evolving, making sure, mitigating risk, and things like that. But going back what you said a second ago, actually, I was on a call with an auditor recently who used the term of there's conformity of the standard, but there's also things that he referenced in terms of spirit of the standard, around continual improvement and things like that. Why we do things and the output of that, not just doing it. You talk about internal audit. Do you do an internal audit and you tick a box, say, right, we've done an internal audit, or do you look at it in the spirit of the standard and say, yeah, we've done an internal audit, and the output of that is we've improved here, and here, and we've done it because of this reason, not just to tick a box and do it here. And we use the example from training records of, okay, great, you've done training records, but has the behaviour changed? Has that impacted? And, that awareness. So it's, conforming with the standard, but also in spirit of why the standards are there. And that goes back to what they get out of it, I think, is if you're doing it in line with the spirit of the standards.
So, Mark, we've known each other many years in the certification industry. How did your journey evolve?
Well, I was in sales. It's not very interesting, but I was in sales and I was doing all your recruitment and things like that. I actually did journalism media studies at university, but never sort of followed into that. But but then I got a job at a certification body in 2009, which is obviously where we first spoke. And actually, I think that's just where I found an industry that suited me, in the sense of sort of more of account management. It was an interesting industry that fascinated me, and just during my time in it, I've just always prided myself of trying to keep up to date with things within it. Whether that's accreditation guidance, whether that's whatever, how standards, how we audit, etc., and stuff like that. And it's an industry, I suppose, that I fell into that I believe in, and I believe in. And when joining DMB, a company, in terms of it's important that when you're talking to businesses is that you believe in what you're talking about. And I think that's something that I found here is trust. Yeah. So but obviously yours is probably more interested than mine. But
I think it's an opportunity to make a difference in organisations and to be able to do something better. And the journey of BS 5750, then into the old QS 9000 for the automotive, then into the ISO series of standards, and evolving really into supply development and secondment, meeting new people, having that opportunity to make a difference, to add value and to bring something to their organisations was quite rewarding.
Yeah.
And like you say, being interested and passionate, and adding value to what they do, and to make a difference to their key performance indicators is challenging, but a great reward at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's an industry that changed so much even since I've been in it from 2009. It's just like, and like I say, so it would have been like 2008 standard, 9001, etc. And it's just changed so much to how we approach things, what the standards do. So I'm sure that'll continue to happen. Continue to evolve as well.
And never before has there been a need to do it right first time. Because you can't use electricity and energy again. If you get warranty claims, it's recorded. If you get rework, it's non-value added. If you've got to buy the material again. So there's more and more opportunity to make it happen great rather than do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, how do DNV support businesses?
In a few ways, actually. I think one of the things that we've worked on a lot over the years is like sort of, and I'll go back to talk about it a lot, and it's important in certification in terms of adding value, making it different from being just a badge on the wall and a certificate on the wall. And we talk about a lot of the things of mitigating risk, etc. And it's how we can add value, I guess, in the audit through things I touched upon in terms of focusing on the right areas, having that partnership-based approach, not just us throwing an agenda of people, we want to go here, it's where do they want as well as what we need to look at from a certification perspective, accreditation. But also how we add value away from that as well, away from our audits. So we have tools that we work with around things that give them visibility of benchmarking their performance against industries, against sizes of businesses, so they can benchmark their performance and see that and target specific areas that help them in terms of focusing on focus areas and how they relate that maybe to their internal auditing and areas they might want to look at. So we've got all of these tools that we've developed from our global database, etc., that feed into audits or allow businesses to make decisions, as well as obviously what we do with yourselves in terms of training, in terms of internal audit, whether that's internal audit, in lead auditor, implementation awareness against these standards to bring that into the business. So we have to say it's about adding value in the audit and just partnership-based approach. And just as I say, I talk about it again, the spirit of the standard and just making sure that we're able to support companies to get that really.
Interesting. And how do organisations contact DNV?
If you go on the website, which is www.dnv.com, can contact me direct through email, which is mark.clewley, Clewley, and I spell that because people throw a U in there, at dnv.com. And like I say, always just in terms of giving advice and helping as much as we can, really. Yeah.
Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you again, and thank you very much.
Always, cheers, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Temple Talks. If you have any questions or would like to find out more about Temple Quality Management Systems and their training and consultancy services, head over to templeqms.com today.